Welcome to the Toastmasters Experience. My name is Evelyn. Get inspired by today's Toastmasters Insights. Enjoy the show. And welcome to another episode of the Toastmasters Experience. I'm excited and delighted to have Vicki Sheehan with me at the District 70 conference. She won first place in evaluation. Congratulations, Vicki, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Evelyn, and it's great to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now, I have interviewed Vicki before. Episode 26 last year. It actually came out on the first week in January 2025. So if you want to listen to her story, you can listen to episode 26. So I thought today we're going to talk a little bit about evaluation, the importance of evaluation. And I also want to talk a little bit about a special club that she's in. But we'll get to that a bit later. We're going to start first with evaluation. I know you've been a member for 11 years, and this is the first time you have won district competition in evaluation?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, the first time I've won.
Okay. And how many times have you competed in evaluation?
Look, every year I compete at club level, and I suppose about 50% of that time I would get to area, and once before, but then usually I'm sort of knocked out in division. Once before I have got to district level, but I didn't place at district, and that was about 5 or 6 years ago. But this time it was my year and I got all the way through.
How does it feel to have won evaluation?
It feels great to have won anything. So yes, it does feel good to win evaluation. It feels, I suppose, a little bit extra special in that evaluation is one of the keystone things of Toastmasters. You know, we pride ourselves on being able to give good and constructive feedback, and it's such an integral part of the Toastmasters. So I feel, I suppose, that I've capped off my first winnings with one of the most unique aspects of the Toastmasters journey.
And I also know that you're a teacher. Mm-hmm. Do you think, because you've been a teacher for so long, that is one of the reasons you're actually quite good at evaluations?
In short, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
I would definitely have to say that. I think, my craft of teaching, which I've been in for a very long time, does involve giving feedback to students. That's part of the teaching process. So I don't think about that aspect of evaluation every day in my work. I just have, success criteria and learning goals that are going on for my students, and I am verbally and a lot of written feedback given to them to help them improve related to their goals. So yes, having the language, having the experience, having the practice has definitely helped in being able to do a Toastmasters style evaluation.
Has being in Toastmasters helped you to be a better teacher in giving students feedback?
I would have to say yes, absolutely, because there are certain, I suppose, aspects of Toastmasters evaluations that revolve very much around wanting, bringing the speaker back and wanting them to feel good about what they have done well, and then just thinking about a sort of an opinion of how you can make your speech better. So having that, I suppose, aspect in your mind when I am teaching, I'm thinking always about trying to get the student to feel good and successful about aspects of their work that they've mastered and that they have done well, and this is going in the right direction, and then trying to give some feedback. The only difference, I would say, is that in Toastmasters, you sort of couch your recommendations as your opinions, whereas in teaching, I don't need to sort of softly pad my recommendations. I can just say to them, you are not doing this well, this has been poorly done, or you have missed out this aspect, this is what you need to do. Whereas That's where I find, I suppose, the biggest difference in the two styles of giving feedback.
Okay. If I can just, because I think this will help the listeners out who may find evaluations difficult, because I know I do find evaluations difficult. What is your process? So, okay, someone gets up and they start delivering a speech. You've got your pad of paper. What do you do? What's the first thing you do?
I don't take very many notes, which is not what I've seen a lot of other evaluators do. They write continually. I don't write a lot of notes. I just make sure that I have down 2 or 3 points that I think they have done very well, and then 2 points, at least 2 points that they could perhaps improve on. That's all I really concentrate. I then, when I write down in the middle of the speech, or when I'm listening to the speech, I write down whether I think it was an inspirational or a persuasive or an informative. So I give it a title, and then make sure I know the name of the speaker and what their speech title was. And underneath the commendations and recommendations, if I have a chance, I do write down an example of what I've heard. So if I'm going to think I really commend the speaker on using vocal variety, I'll put an example down in my notes so that I can refer back to that when I am explaining that to the audience. And the very last thing I do is that I always write down how the speaker made me feel, what emotion it created in me. Did it just create a feel-good, funny sort of feeling, or was it, depending on what the topic was, did I really feel moved? Did I feel curious? Did I feel excited? That type of thing. So that is one of the most important things that I try to write down once the speech is finished, just how I felt.
How do you memorize what you're going to say? Because I have noticed that you don't use notes when you give the evaluation.
No, I don't. So that's what I use the 5 minutes for. When I practice that, they give you 5 minutes to write up sort of your notes, and then they take your notes from you, and then you have the rest of the time in there, depending on your speaking order, to practice and rehearse or go through in your mind what you're going to say. Now, obviously, I think in evaluation, the speaking order has an incredible effect on your ability to deliver well. The more time, I know for me, the more time I have to practice what I'm going to say. So if I'm speaker number 5, 6, 7, I have a much better chance of being able to deliver a more polished performance than if I'm speaker 1. But I do memorize. It's something that I've always been conscious of, developing that skill and memorizing, which means I don't memorize word for word. I'm a visual person, and I memorize concepts. So all I need to remember as I'm walking on that stage is what the speech was, what type of speech it was, how it made me feel, the commendations and the recommendations. And I just need to remember a couple of words of each of those. And then once I say that line, I know my brain kicks into gear and will flow. And often what I've practiced word for word in the session beforehand, it's not exactly as it comes out.
Okay. And do you have a process though? Like when you're out there in the 5 minutes, do you have a process like, okay, the first thing I'm going to say is thank you to the speaker, or you know what I mean? Do you have like a
Yes.
template or something like that? Yeah.
Yes, I do. I do have a template or a scaffold. And a few scaffolds are, one of the things is I try to have an opening line in my speeches that I remember, whether it's even another international speech or humorous speech. I just remember word for word the beginning and the end. So I try to memorize or write out an opening line, and that opening line scaffold is never ever, I've just had the pleasure of listening to so-and-so's speech on such and such. It is never that. It is always something like what I said in my winning evaluation was, I always know when I'm listening to a great speaker. I forget to write copious notes, and Meow was a great speaker because
Right.
I wrote nothing down. So I always try to go with a hook line that is not the same that everyone else is going to use.
Right, right. No, I just, I've been watching evaluation speeches for years, and I guess, like, how do you do that? Like, how do you even listen in so intently? Because I don't know, I just lose focus. I guess, have you ever found that when you're evaluating that you've actually lost focus?
I often have found that I've lost a bit of focus on listening to them. And that depends sometimes if the speaker is extremely good and it is a very polished speech and I can't really think of anything to recommend her on, then I start to get nervous energy that will think, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And I'm not really listening to what she's going to say. And so if they have a lot of things to evaluate and to commend or to recommend on, then I find I don't lose as much focus then. But I also try not to focus on, I do practice evaluations beforehand. And the two things I practice and that I write down is that I have a lot of notes when I haven't heard anyone about, if you're going to comment on vocal variety, have at least five. I have 5 things knowledge just in my head that I think, was it the tone of her voice? What can you talk about tone? Was it the volume of her voice? What can you say about volume? So they are my whys. If it's a commendation, I'll say, your tone was really interesting. And why your tone grabbed my attention is that it went from high to low. Or if your tone was very monotonous, or if your volume was very low, I do have a stockpile of, I suppose, facts or information in my brain that'll say, well, if I can't hear what you're saying, perhaps you can lift your chin a bit higher and project to the back. So I definitely have a stockpile of commendations, recommendations with all the aspects of speaking and how they could improve it or what makes it good. And that's just stored knowledge in my head. Most of the time that comes out. Sometimes, though, I might not rely on it, that much, but most of the time I do go back to, well, if I really liked this aspect of the speech, why did I like it?
Okay.
And if I didn't like an aspect of a speech or it didn't really land with me, how can I make it better? So the why and the how are 2 questions I continually ask myself.
Because you are a teacher as well, you probably listen differently. Is maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
That may be the case.
Okay. I mean, just listen more, not critically, that's not the right word, but listen more, what's the word? Evaluation like. I don't know.
Yes.
Yes,
It
yes.
probably listens more, critically would be a good word, or listens more intently.
Yeah.
And because I have a stockpile of things that I'm looking for,
Yeah.
sometimes you've got to have that knowledge. You can't tell someone to improve if you don't have the whys and the hows to do it with. So, certainly you can say, in my opinion, but you still have to back it up with some, explanation or back it up with some reasons as to why that was great or how you can improve it.
I love that idea of having a stockpile of, because that is something we do in Toastmasters as we evaluate. So do you have maybe a notebook that you keep or that you write these things down?
I do. I do have a notebook that I have written those things down. And more so, another thing that I've kept is I have consciously gone and written a series of opening lines for the commendations and recommendations. So instead of saying what I really liked about so and so's speech, that is so overused that I think subconsciously or consciously that puts the audience and the judges off because everybody starts with that sentence. So I try to have a few other lines in place as my opening lines for each section. Instead of in summary, I say, so to wrap it all up,
Okay.
this is what she should consider. Just having a few of those lines, I think. And those things I write down and then I practice them over and over so that so it becomes second nature to me.
Okay, so I guess before, because you knew you were going to be in the district evaluation competition, how do you prepare for an evaluation competition? Because obviously you're listening on the day.
Yes, yes. Look, I there is a little bit of just self-belief and good fortune that does happen on the day. In preparation, I am more the type of speaker that enjoys being prepared. So I like participating in prepared speeches where I can just have it fully knowledgeable in my brain and get on there and perform. Whereas the unknown, and just with my personality, is a lot more stressful. Whereas I know that some Toastmasters, they love the unknown. They don't want to have to prepare speeches. They just will get up there and wing it, and that is really good for them. I don't necessarily like that the most. To overcome that, I did do a lot of preparation for my opening lines. All right, I wrote down those particular things. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to be able to say that, or it's going to come back to you, on the spot. But that was my preparation that made me feel comfortable about being prepared for it all. But I do remember, Evelyn, I had, Sabi, the international world public speaking champion, was there watching the evaluation. And he came up to me afterwards and said, just one line. He said, "Great job. I loved it when you pulled that face
Oh.
and you were speaking about gestures." And I thought, wow, that was the one thing that I hadn't anticipated doing before I went on stage. So there you go. And it was
Okay. Yeah.
it was just a section where the speaker was reading out some very funny lines, and she was mimicking that she was reading a letter from her husband and he was telling her what to say.
Uh-huh.
And they were very funny vocal lines. But I said to her, you need to add a bit of non-verbal and turn to the audience and pull a strange, funny face after each of the lines to indicate what that means to you. And I gave an example of that, and it got a laugh, and it also got the attention of Sabby on that day. So, but
Yeah.
I didn't. That was something I had never done that before, and I didn't intend to do it.
Oh, there,
I
there,
didn't
there
think
you
that
go. Because nonverbal
non-verbal.
gestures are just as important, aren't they? So
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. No, I do remember that did pull a laugh. So and that makes a difference, I think, with judging too, because evaluations tend to be quite serious. So if there's a little
Mhm.
bit of laughter in there, that would maybe that gave you a few extra points. Well, you obviously won. So so
Maybe it did.
I want to talk about this other club that you're in. I guess it's not a community club. What sort of club is it?
No, it's not. This is the club called Corrective Services, and it's a club, a Toastmasters club that's set up, and it has a small membership of people that are involved in managing or organising the delivery of speechcraft or Toastmasters or gavel clubs in prisons around the state. So it started, I'm just a member of that club to facilitate my involvement in teaching in the corrective services jails in the state. And there's really only, I have been to a few jails, but there's one at the moment that I've been going to regularly with another colleague, Monique, for the last 6 or 7 years. And so it is really just an administration club that tries to manage that. But we are very much at the, I suppose, mercy of the New South Wales state government in terms of corrective services and what we can and can do in there.
Hmm.
And, so far there has been interest in having speech crafts and public speaking courses done for the inmates. And we work mainly out of Macquarie Correctional Centre out near Wellington. And that is a very a different style of jail. They are in pods, they're not in cells, and they have a very clear mandate and I suppose direction about trying to educate and reform the prisoners. So that works, along the lines of why we go out there and do that. And it's extremely rewarding to be involved with that service. to the community.
So it's a minimum security.
Look, it technically is a maximum
Oh,
security, but those type of words, I suppose, I mean, maximum security and minimum security often just refer to, as well as not necessarily the crime you've done, but the length of time that
okay.
you're there.
I love this idea of, giving back and then
Mm.
giving back to obviously young men who, because it's only men that are in this,
The ones
yeah,
that we've been involved in, yes.
involved in. So they're young, usually young men, and
Mm.
just giving them, I guess, some sort of maybe some hope or give them another self-development skill. Was that the idea when it initially started?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was initiated by one of the officers up in Wellington, and he was very proactive in trying to get a series of educational opportunities and different services into this particular jail. They run TAFE courses. They allow the inmates to participate in university courses. There are several other courses, and Toastmasters was one of them. And it is quite enlightening to see the effect that something I have known for a very long time, because I've had a long interest in public speaking, in drama. I remember many years ago in my first years of teaching, I had a professor tell me that the most important subject in school for all students to be taught was drama,
Oh,
because it didn't matter what job they were going to be involved in, they always had to have the ability to be able to speak and communicate and collaborate with other people, and drama gave them the skills to do that. So and that's what I believe about public speaking. It doesn't really matter. If you can effectively communicate with someone, then you have a greater chance of surviving in this world, and surviving, nicely in a way that's going to be good for you and good for everyone else around you, because we are social beings. And that is mainly the goal of this, is to let these inmates see that, you don't have to punch someone out to send a message. You can actually use your words,
right, right,
right?
right.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
they can, they are on the verge of often trying to, organize their life into what they're going to be doing later on, getting jobs, doing study, and every aspect of your life involves communicating. So we give them lots of practice at that through the speechcraft course.
yeah. I just think it's such a great idea. Now, I don't know, are there other clubs that you know of around the world where Toastmasters involves themselves in sort of a program like this?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I, I'm not. I'm not completely sure about in Australia. I believe there might be some in Western Australia where Toastmasters clubs are involved in with corrective services. Over in the United States, it is very well organised and very popular, and there are a lot of clubs that contribute to running public speaking courses in correctional institutions.
I really love that idea. I know about 2, 3 years ago, I ended up going to a corrective services meeting
Mhm.
with Vicki Wilson,
Mhm.
and at first it was a bit intimidating because
Mhm.
you're the gates are opening, and you're going into a jail. You have to give up your
Mhm.
ID and your phone, but once
Yeah.
I got into the room, and the guys are big. They're big and
Mhm.
they're all so young. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what shocked me, how young they were. But because we had given up our phones, and we really sort of were forced, not forced. I ended up speaking to a whole bunch of young men, and it was really engaging, and it was really heartwarming too, to see that they were so appreciative of a group of us coming in and
Mm.
helping them to
Mm.
speak. When you go in, do you go in with other Toastmasters, or is it?
Yes,
Yeah.
there are a number of Toastmasters that come in on different occasions. Most of them I've known for quite a while. I But like you, Evelyn, I did have an enormous sense of how respectful those men were towards, first of all, us giving up the time to spend with them, and secondly, because I think they really realized that, we weren't necessarily getting paid. It was a service that we were doing for them, and we were doing it out of our belief in how we could make their lives better. And they were appreciative of that. And I got that sense from them very much. And so when all of that feeling and emotion is reciprocated between each other, you just try better, and you want to go again and you want to come along. And the same happens for them. But also the respect that they were showing in terms of actually just listening to you. I mean, our world now is overtaken by phones, and you even going to some Toastmasters meetings, you sit there and everyone's just flicking through and doom scrolling on their phone as you're speaking. But here was a group of men in a classroom that were looking directly at us and intently listening to what we were going to say.
Yeah,
And that was really good.
Yeah, and because I didn't have my phone either, I was
No.
like, oh God, I really have to pay attention. But it was good. It was actually a really good experience. So you were saying that in New South Wales, it's up to the mercy of the funding of the government to fund these self-development courses for the Macquarie Jail. Is that correct?
That's true. That's true. The government has, funding that they give to, I think it's what they call dissidence programs, which is educational programs to help in the reform of inmates so that they can improve the fact or improve the rate of, not returning. There's a high percentage of people in jail, both male and female, once they get out, the chances of them just coming back in because they go straight back to their own environment before. And that was part of the reason why that ended up, the connection with people that were encouraging them to do wrong things. So the dissidence programs is part of that. And I don't know the details of how much money or where the funding goes or what direction it's given to. But just like anything, the state government run the corrective services, and they allocate the money to all the different, from the employment of, officers right through to the education programs, right through to the food, everything. So
Okay.
I believe it is very much dependent on that as to when people can go in and go out. So, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. Sometimes it's really got good environmental people, everyone's behind you. Other times it's not taken a priority, but you just got to keep, pushing through.
Yeah. Now you being a teacher, I mean, like you were just saying, communication has changed so much, with the
Mm,
phone, social media.
mm,
I mean, I feel Toastmasters is needed more than ever now because the art of conversation has really been lost. Have you
mm.
noticed that amongst your students?
Absolutely, absolutely. I look, it depends on, I suppose, what school and environment. I mean, phones are not allowed in schools now. The school I teach in hasn't had them there for, 5 years, but the students are still on their devices all the time. They're on their computers, and all of the apps that were available on phones are now available on their computer. And unless the school blocks
Yeah.
certain social media things on the computer. Students are just doing, if they're not looking at a small, 4 by 4 inch screen on their phone, they're looking at a 20 by 20 centimeter screen on their laptop. And
Yeah.
now with the advent and the increase of AI, I'm afraid I'm not committed that this will happen because I can feel a little bit of society's tide turning and a bit of a revolt against the screens and the AI interjection. And I think communication is incredibly important. And it starts at school, but schools are doing the best they can. It's not the schools that are directing students down the wrong lane. It's the parents at
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
You can't spend 40% of your waking or 100% of your waking hours looking at your phone and look at your child and say, hey, get off your phone. A lot of parents are trying to put in restraints around device use, but you wonder, when the child is sort of out and about, they've been sent down the back of the bush or they've been sent into the backyard to play. And then after they've played for 2 hours, they can come in and be on their device. And that whole 2 hours out in the backyard, all they're thinking about is what they're going to do on their device.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
defeats the purpose as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
no, it's interesting times that we're living in, but I think you just cannot beat face-to-face communication,
no,
and
no.
I think as a speaker, as a teacher, we'll be okay. It is a bit scary out there with AI and all that. Vicki, it's been such a pleasure, but I do want to ask one last question to finish up the podcast. What advice would you give someone who's thinking about joining Toastmasters?
Well, of course, apart from the yes, just do it, I think it helps to join Toastmasters if you have a goal of something that you want to achieve. Now, a lot of people do join for the purpose of, doing a speech, a family speech, or something that's coming up at work. I think that is really good to have in your mind. That is the motivating factor to get you on. But secondly, I think the advice of that speaking is just like gym work. The more you do it, the better you become at it. And as soon as you stop going to the gym, your muscles fall to pieces. As soon as you stop going to Toastmasters, then you lose the skills that you've achieved. So I think joining Toastmasters for a goal and a purpose is a really good stepping stone and entry level. But I think if you're going to join Toastmasters, I would really think of it like a life skill that needs to be kept on practicing all the time.
Thanks again, Vicki.
Not a problem. Thanks, Evelyn. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for your company. Please tune in next time to the Toastmasters Experience.